That is not your mother.
Animals are more intelligent than we give them credit for. They can forage for food, organize street gangs, plan a vacation to Jamaica, and you get the idea. Illumination's newest film, Migration, follows birds of all sorts. So the question we've got to answer is, of course, which ones are the smartest? Welcome to Wicked Binge. This is Migration characters, dumb to brilliant. Spoiler warning ahead, as usual. While nobody in the movie is flat out dumb, someone has to take the bottom spot. And today, it's Gwen. Really, this one should be pretty self-explanatory. When you have a cast of characters who all have a reasonable amount of intelligence, you have to consider other criteria to judge who's the smartest and least smart.
But it's gross!
Right now, that criteria is age, and Gwen is a literal child. Given how easily she believes her dad's exaggerated bedtime horror stories about the outside world, we'd be surprised if Gwen was older than 5 or 6, when every other character in the movie is either an adult or at least significantly older than her. That basically makes her the least smart by default. But credit where it's due, Gwen does have good emotional intelligence.
I haven't kissed Harry goodbye!
No. Blow him a kiss. Mwah. Mwah.
She gives Dax a healthy dose of hugs when she notices he's upset, and is the one to convince Uncle Dan to tag along on their migration adventure. That charisma might just be due to her being a kid, but it's still worth mentioning. Up next, we have the family slacker / comic relief Uncle Dan, played by the incomparable Danny DeVito.
Okay, so let's see what we got.
Uncle Dan is content to just relax and live his life by the family pond. He's so content that he tends to find himself floating out to sea and washing up on the mallard's doorstep, or dirt step. Unlike Mac, Dan's preference of a lazy lifestyle isn't due to any paranoia or fear of the outside world.
Hello there.
He's just a simple duck who's satisfied with a simple life and doesn't want to rock the boat. There's a certain level of intelligence that comes with choosing to live a simple, stable life, so we'll give him credit for that. That said, out of all the adults in the movie, Uncle Dan is by far the most clumsy and reckless. This never comes out of a place of malice or even stupidity, really. He's just got that don't give a duck energy that you gotta respect. Still, he doesn't really have any intellectual feats, so here he stays near the bottom of our list. Now it's time for the main mallard himself, Mac. It might seem strange to place Mac so low, considering that despite his paranoia, he is a pretty well-rounded guy in general. He's always careful to consider the potential danger in any given situation.
We are not flying through this crazy death trap of a city.
And being cautious on its own is pretty darn smart. But what Mac has in terms of book smarts, he completely lacks in street smarts. Mac manages to offend just about everyone the family encounters in the movie at some point, due to his preconceived notions about them. From calling pigeons vermin, which has gotta be a slur in bird culture, to assuming Aaron is a predator because of his own view of herons. This is sometimes understandable. Aaron did look like she was ready to cook and eat his kids for a moment, but Mac never really goes out of his way to test whether or not his view of the world is right. Only after realizing he'll end up a drifter like Uncle Dan does he even start to change his ways, and it's a pretty slow change.
Let's fly.
But he makes a lot of progress in 90 minutes, so we're still keen on giving him some credit. Our next entry is especially elegant. It's the yoga-loving Goose, Gugu. Even more so than Gwen, Gugu deserves some praise for his people skills. He's got a lot of people under his wings, pun intended, and has managed to keep them all safe, organized, and happy in their own little paradise where they're fed and pampered to their heart's content. His calming energy puts the people around him at ease so they can enjoy their time at his little slice of heaven. And therein lies the reason he isn't higher. It turns out that Gugu's supposed paradise is actually a scheme to fatten the birds up so they can be sold to the chef to make some duck à l'orange. Gugu had no way of knowing this. Heck, he might not even know what a chef is. But the fact that he almost single-handedly led his people to an unspeakably terrible doom means we have a little more to criticize him for than the other characters. Well, in terms of smarts, that is. In terms of morals, nobody deserves a more scathing review than the chef. But ignoring how much of a jerk he is, let's look at his intellectual feats. For starters, he runs a kitchen at a fancy big city restaurant. That's enough to tell us that the chef has a strong head on his shoulders and is able to take a lot of pressure, even if he does lose his temper easily. It's also worth mentioning that Chef is the only human in the ensemble cast, which gives him an objective advantage over the ducks, and yet he still lost to them. This man somehow managed to get totally blindsided by a few ducks, with all the resources at his disposal. You're telling me the man who could track down a pack of obese geese in a helicopter wasn't smart enough to keep the birds away from the fruit and vegetables? Wouldn't that contaminate him? There's so much to question with this guy, and he doesn't help us since he has zero dialogue in the movie. So here he stays in the middle of the list. We're now entering the top 5, starting with the next of the Mallard family, Dax. Like Gwen, Dax is a kid, albeit a considerably older one, so he's also prone to naivete that often gets him hurt. He recklessly attacks the chef to try and save Gugu's flock, but ends up getting his wings gravely injured in the process, and temporarily loses the ability to fly. That might raise the question of why he's so high, and the answer is simple. Dax, for his age, is shockingly resourceful and tactful. When his parents and the other birds get kidnapped by the chef, he's able to keep a cool head under pressure most adult humans can't even fathom.
Do not panic.
He consoles his sister and gets an idea to use some of Delroy's shedded feathers to rebuild his wings so he can fly again, showing some excellent practical skills. He also shares none of his dad's paranoia.
Father would I be if I put my young fowl in harm's way for no reason except a chance at a Caribbean vacation?
And doesn't believe his scary stories about the outside world. Maybe that sheltered, paranoid upbringing is what led him to smarten up in the first place. In any case, Dax has made it to the list's upper half, a pretty impressive feat for a kid. Landing just outside of the top 3 are Aaron and Heron, the friendly neighborhood herons. Families too are kind enough to give the mallards shelter during a rainy night, offering their nicest bed in the process. You could argue that this is almost too trusting to be called a smart move.
And you taste so good.
Or you could argue that it's a display of some incredible sensing skills. Seriously, Erin is able to detect the presence of the mallards pretty easily and takes them into her home without another thought. It was like she knew they weren't a threat by instinct. She also successfully saves them from a ravenous, bird-hungry fish with Heron's help, even though it requires seemingly attacking the family. While they have some good skills and are adept at protecting others, we have to take a few points away for their purely unsettling nature. It doesn't make them dumb by any means, but, well, some clearer communication definitely wouldn't hurt. That mostly comes down to them being elderly, though, so we won't take a lot of credit away from them for it. For our bronze medal of intellect, we've got a character who's all about street smarts, the Chump. Don't be deceived by that name. Chump is no mere chump. In fact, she's able to lead a whole gang of pigeons who roam the city streets for food. She's respected as a leader.
Oh, for sure.
As her very presence seems to command silence from those around her, she's able to intimidate Mac into backing down after an insult and negotiates with Pam from splitting the sandwich 50-50 to splitting it 67-33. She also has a good sense of direction.
Maybe don't stick too close.
And leads the mallards to her friend Delroy so they can get directions to Jamaica. She has a short fuse, which loses her a few points, but Chump is one of, if not the most street-smart character in the movie. The runner-up may be a shocker, but the silver medal of intellect goes to Pam, Mac's other half. Unlike her husband, Pam doesn't have a cowardly bone in her body. She wants to see the world for what it is, instead of fearing the unknown.
I want us to get out and see the world.
She's able to connect with birds of all kinds and often acts as a mediator between others and her less than sensitive husband. We already talked about the sandwich negotiation between her and Chump, and it's worth mentioning that Pam was able to keep a cool head while dealing tactfully with a seemingly hostile stranger. Her bravery and sensitivity is a perfect buffer to her hubby's paranoia, which makes her able to get them out of a lot of jams. Even when she slips into despair, she's able to come out of it pretty quickly, with some of Mac's encouragement, of course. In fact, it feels weird not to put such a well-rounded character in the top spot. Call us crazy for this, but our choice for the most intelligent character is also the most exotic character in the movie, Delroy. Right off the bat, it takes some serious mental fortitude to retain your own sanity when you've been taken away from your home and locked in a cage barely any bigger than you for years on end. Delroy has to get some points for that, if nothing else.
We could get the key.
No, kid. That's impossible.
He also has an exceptional sense of direction and memory, given how he was able to give the mallards directions to Jamaica with no hesitation.
I would be honored to take it in myself.
And how he was able to successfully lead them back there, despite his own doubt. The worst we could say about Delroy, honestly, is that he's a little bit emotional, which could potentially get in his way someday. But from what we see, the dude is pretty sharp and actually very resourceful. He uses the fruits as ammunition against the chef when they're trapped, and uses his new BFF Uncle Dan as a weapon. It's also Delroy who comes up with the idea for Dan and Pam to walk to the rhythm of a dance so they can move while stuck in the cage. Street smarts, book smarts, emotional intelligence, they're all present in Delroy. And the fact that he's able to resist insanity via near, total isolation makes him all the more impressive.